Everywhere I come from, the truth is an irony. Just like animal farm, justice mean inequity. So who go say the truth? Who go say the truth? Christian can say silence, Islamic leaders silence, kings and queens silence, traditional leaders silence. So who go say the truth? We are them go so confused the call. Now by area why no better. We are them go so confused the call. One guy's out here why no better. Who go say the truth? Who go say the truth? Oh, he need it now, see what I see so. Now your friend on a nine come as them. Only papi obeka na sembia. So I want one over to it. Everybody was afraid. And when Tina to my cottage again nine. Once my boy dumping one and I see. But who go tell the truth? Nanai or say me. Nanso bien person beka wasam because everybody is afraid. Anya safwe muayini. Aku drop on yina dalima. And who go say the truth? Obiaja konson so to grow Germansa to me be a cacobrafo. Efo anyina ye. Efo. When you know yet. Na so kutrata down na so be dia back or why no keke. I fene for be man mo pia for efo ne cross on my mo. Hanya safwe mo ayini. Akuku drop for you na dalima. And who go say the truth? Abaya di bote chino. Yedi bi bebo nyande bi. Kachi sa udi oma upipi numa. Would your mind never shine my frafonsa? But who go tell the truth? TUC, silence. Even journalists, silence. Oh, then who go say the truth? Right is right. Wrong is wrong, no matter how you justify. You say you wanna get rid of corruption. Someone want to help you, now the person become your target. Jobless no they mean senseless, poverty no they mean useless. One day them go resist.
Hello and welcome once again. It's a pleasure to welcome you to this evening's program on MyView show. It's been a while, but I know you will understand us as we go along. It is always my pleasure to have you on the show, and we are coming to you live on Today's Ghana News TV with me, Jerome, your regular host. And let me equally remind you that we are also live on Switch by satellite, Facebook, Instagram, and YouTube, all on Today's Ghana News TV news. And you can equally follow us on Twitter and TikTok, as well as podcasts on Anchor FM. It's always a pleasure to be part and parcel of your evening on every Monday as we discuss various pertinent issues concerning Ghana. I express my view, you express your view, and then we take the view of our invited guest. Wherever you are, do well to share the link so that many more people will come to an understanding of the topic that we want to discuss this evening. What is the topic under deliberation this evening? Wherever you are, be part of the show. We want to look at BRICS. It's an acronym that is in vogue currently and its influence on the African nations. Or in other words, the West seems to be losing its hegemony to BRICS. And what is the fate of the African nations in this shift? I know you have your view. I have my view. Welcome to my view show on today's Ghana News TV. And when we come back after this short break, I would introduce the guest for this evening. Once again, you are most welcome. I hope my producer will now give me a wonderful tune and then we move into this.
Mampam also untie so dogo binwa bem mampam also untie nani amuka nyina guna swati move swara mampam also untie move swara mampam also untie. Once upon a time, animal called Mampam. Any king where them go bring him. Mampam said that king know the force. Tiger was a king. Mampam said he know the force. Elephant come. Mampam some better than you. The peaceful creature panda. Mampam said I want to know the force. Lion became a king. Mampam said I want be the worst ever. Monsomeria. Mampam now become a king. All the crawling animals, everybody become minister. Ya ton ya color TV. Ya dibia so sort of black and white. Oh my equality, oh my attitude upon some cry. Oh my anima tiny show, oh my so. Also auntie, so dogo binwa bem. Also yo, nani amuka nyina guna swati, mube swara. Mampam, Osanti, Mubesu, Mampam, Osamuyo. Mampam, what you can say, Omanisu, on the Ojineni. Na, Ojan will be a moon. No, just what and I so will be more. Mampam, Babosia. Chanwo yini bia watuna kunyana sopan ye umuni odeye amim samni akasi samkwa ya to yeti omaimu tisama frafo areho sakio tujini oje tuono na odi tuono onye so dogo binwa bem na mampam no so ntie no so dogo binwa bem mo be swara mampam oso ntie Babylon so antene ho ho ne taya yeti ni so no emra ye kaizayon Sambra Bejiane no hosu continue so ehone di ensem ko sensenia na beda ya 20 jejum ananafo asase so
Wonderful. Once again, you are welcome to my view show on today's Ghana News TV with me, Jerome. As I did indicate at the beginning, we have this acronym BRICS, and it seems to have an influence on African nations, or in other words, the West seems to be losing its hegemony to BRICS. And in this situation, What is the fate of the African nations in this paradigm shift? It is an issue that we want to express our views. I will express mine and take yours as well. And on the seat today, we have no other person but Mr. Charles Mensah, ESQ. He is a private legal practitioner and he happens to be a member of the National Democratic Congress of Hamburg branch. And he will be here this evening as once again to express his views on this influence or BRICS influence on African nations and then the way forward. You are equally invited to submit your views along the line, whether Facebook, WhatsApp, our YouTube link, Instagram, what have you. We would share your views on the show as well. Mr. Charles Mensah, you're most welcome to the program.
Thank you very much, and good evening to you, and good evening to your viewers, as well as your listeners across the globe.
Great. It's good to have you once again. You know, it's been a while, but then when there are very thorny issues, we always look for people like you to come and help us understand things better. You know, yeah. So, to set the ball rolling, we're just trying, as I indicated, we want to look at BRICS and its influence on the African nations. But I'm pretty sure a lot of people out there will want to even understand what this BRICS is all about. What the other acronym BRICS? What does it really stand for?
All right, thank you very much once again, and let me use this opportunity to also express my sincere condolence to the family of the Ashama Constituency Communication Officer who passed away some 3 days ago. And today was the burial. No, yesterday was the burial, and today was the day that some funeral rites were held in her memory. So I wish to express my sincere condolence to the family. You know, as a communicator myself, it is always good to identify yourself with other communicators. So
Definitely.
having heard of her demise, I was really struck by it, and I wish to express my condolence to the family.
It seems we are losing the last part of your statements. We couldn't get that clearly.
Can you hear me?
We lost you at a point in time when you were ending your statement.
Oh, I was saying that I wanted to express my sincere condolence to
Oh,
the
okay.
bereaved family and the NDC family as well, because they have also lost an asset.
Definitely, definitely. I think today's
All
Ghana
right.
News TV team, we want to associate
Yes,
ourselves with
now
such
your
a,
question.
yeah,
You
I
asked
think just
about break.
yeah. We also want to just associate ourselves with your condolences to the entire family. And because once we
Oh,
have
very well.
gotten you and we always try to develop content for our program, definitely we have to take solace in the good Lord will grant her a restful place.
Sure,
Yeah.
sure. We'll
So
pray for that.
so now I wanted you to now throw a bit light on the acronym BRICS. What does it really stand for and
Oh,
how did it
okay.
come about?
Yes. To start with, let's just look at what BRICS or break stand for. You know, initially it was break
Yeah,
at the formation stage. It was break, and later on became BRICS.
BRICS.
And break simply means Brazil, Russia, India, and China. These
Okay.
countries came together to form the BRIC bloc. That was in 2000, in the early 2000s.
Okay.
And in 2009, an invitation was extended to South Africa to join the bloc, and officially South Africa joined the bloc in 2010. So it became BRICS. Now the motive of this bloc was to also form a powerful economic bloc to challenge that of the US. So these countries were emerging economies.
Okay.
They were emerging economies that they were looking at in the year 2050, they will be the leading economies in the world. So
Okay.
that is the more reason why they brought on board the South African country to represent the African continent on the bloc. And South Africa accepted to be part of the bloc because the agenda of the bloc fortunately corresponded with that of South Africa's infrastructure development plan. That
Okay.
is why they also accepted to join the bloc in 2010, for which we now have the acronym BRICS.
That is interesting. You said you made a statement that these are emerging economies that have come together, and their target is 2050 to become to be able to run shoulders with probably the West. Why would they even try to form such a bloc? Why would they want to run shoulders with the West?
Yes, their aim was to promote peace, to promote security, and also to promote development and cooperation. That was the aim for which the bloc was formed.
Okay.
So that when it comes to ensuring peace in the region that they see there is no peace, they will have the strength and they will also have the might to ensure that there is peace in that sub-region. So, for instance, the bloc could ensure peace in Africa because Africa is part of the bloc. If there is any African country that there is no peace, they could use the membership of South Africa to persuade such an African country to ensure that there is peace in that African country.
Okay. Now,
With
before we go,
development and cooperation, they were looking at emerging economies, and for that matter, they were aiming at win-win situation. So you bring this, I bring that, then we all benefit from that partnership arrangement. That is why you can now find China dominating in African countries. It's as a result of this idea that is behind the formation of the BRICS, which has led to China dominating African countries.
before we get to see how this break happens to have an influence on African nations, we made reference to the West. Who really consists of the West?
Come again?
We made reference to the West. They want to run shoulders with the West. So I'm asking,
Yeah.
who really consists of this West?
Yes, predominantly, if you mention the West, you are talking about the European countries. You're talking about the European countries and that of the US. Yes.
Okay.
And the European countries, they form the EU, that is the European Union, and their approach to expansion economically was the colonization system. That is why you find out that during the colonial era, European countries were dominating. So they used their colonization system to expand. And America form of expansion was the globalization through economies. So these are the difference. So America looks at globalization, and the EU or the European countries looked at globalization. America criticized the Europeans' approach to expansion because they saw globalization to be an inhumane, or slavery as inhumane activity. So they were of the view that globalization could lead to the expansion of economies. So they looked at globalization.
Okay. If we look
This
at it
was
from that point
it.
of view, Mr. Mensah, we want to look at the influence of BRICS on African nations. We have seen the West and seen how the West believes that they can have influence on other emerging economies. Now, can we therefore say if the BRICS is making inroads in Africa, could we therefore say that the West is losing its hegemony? And if it is so, what does that really mean to the ordinary man on the street?
Yes, yeah, you've mentioned the word hegemony. Yes, hegemony simply means a state dominating the others in terms of politics, or that is political, economically, or military. So you
Okay.
look at it from the angle of, let's say, the economic aspect. Now, if you look at it from the economic aspect, you realize that currently, as it stands now, the Americans have dominated the world by having the biggest economy. So this break block were aiming at diluting this dominance of America in the world in terms of the economy, or economically. That is why they formed the break block. Now, if you look at 2010, China became the second biggest economy in the world.
Okay.
Okay, so China being the second biggest economy in the world, and also part of the break block, you could realize that going forward, they are likely to overtake the break. I'm talking about the break block. They are likely to overtake that of America. So America's dominance in terms of economic powers is gradually declining, and the COVID era showed that yes, American dominance is declining. Most of the countries were looking at China producing the vaccine to cure the virus, or to immune people from the virus. Now, back to your question, that the impact of the BRIC bloc on Africa. You know, Africa as a continent, most of the economies are emerging economies, and partnering with this bloc will certainly propel the development that you and I envisage Africa will get. But in practicality, China and other countries of this bloc also have their main motive of seeking to enter into the African market. On paper, it may sound nice that we are partnering this bloc to achieve development, to achieve cooperation, to achieve security, to achieve peaceful environment. But they also have their own motive for entering into the African market. You know,
Okay.
the African continent controls about 70% of world resources, and the other continents, that the remaining continents, control only 30%. So that should tell you that these other countries will not sit down for Africans to gain economic independence totally, so that they will lose the raw materials that they get from Africa for their factories. So on paper, it might look beautiful, but in practicality, that is not the case. So you realize that if you take Ghana, for instance, you realize that the Ghanaian economy is highly dominated by Chinese investors. For instance, this debt issue that is hanging over the Ghanaian government, the external aspect, that is the foreign aspect of the debt. China alone controls about $1.8 billion. So you realize that if China decides to write off this debt, we are likely to meet the condition the IMF is seeking from Ghana. So China is really having a huge debt portfolio that the government cannot do away with it.
Wow. So, from where you sit, you have already said the BRICS, they have their own agenda. And even within that group, the individual countries have an agenda for their influence in the African terrain. And then you have cited Ghana as an example. Even though the external component of our debt highly controlled by China, we are looking at conditionality set out for us by IMF, which is also coming from the West. Of the two, where you sit, which one will be better in terms of an influence in an African terrain with reference to Ghana, the two sides?
Yeah, your question again,
I'm saying that we have seen that BRICS is coming up strongly. And even within BRICS, one of the countries, China, has a huge debt portfolio on Ghana. And if they're able to write it out, then Ghana might meet the conditions set out by the IMF. The IMF is coming from the West.
Yes.
And we're going to IMF for a bailout. So of the two, which one is a lesser evil for Ghana?
Oh, okay. If I understand your question clearly, you are suggesting that should China write off our debt and meeting IMF conditions, between these two, which one would be better for Ghana, right?
Yeah.
Good. China will certainly write off your debt by giving you some conditions. They will not just write it off and ask you to go scot-free, because this is hard currency that they lend to the states. So certainly, if they should write it off, they are going to give you some conditionalities, and the conditionalities may be in the form of allowing them to enter into the Ghanaian market, to mine, to our gold reserves, our oil, anything that they think is worth for them, they will just demand that you give them, and they will write your debt off. But if you take IMF, for instance, meeting the IMF conditionality has its own implications for the economy, because if we should meet the conditionality and the program approved for the country, the 3 billion that we are seeking is not going to come in bulk. It's going to come in tranches. That is in 3 batches. But the IMF will certainly run the country behind the scene, because they will make sure that the 3 billion that they are going to give you is put to better use for the needed dividend to accrue to the country. So they will therefore, as you are already aware, they have appointed a country director or a country advisor to the Bank of Ghana. And I've also heard of US proposing or appointing a country advisor to the Ministry of Finance.
Yeah.
It may sound diplomatic, but in reality, they are telling you that you cannot manage your affairs. So let these people come and assist you manage your affairs. And you know that there is no free lunch. So when these people come in to assist you to run your economy, virtually they are going to dictate to you what to do and what not to do. So for me, where I sit, I will prefer China writing off our debt so that we could meet the IMF conditions for a program to be approved by the board for Ghana.
Okay. I want us to look at a term that is often running through in the global economy. But before we get to that point, I want us to just make a short stop at the influence of Russia in terms of the BRICS. If you look at Russia, any country that is backed by Russia seems to be solid on its ground as compared to the West.
Yes,
Yeah.
yes, Russia is a powerful country in terms of economy and in terms of military. Yes, so even some of the West depend on Russia for gas. So if you should rise up against Russia, they will simply withdraw the supply of gas to your country. And a typical example is Germany. You know, Germany during the early days of the Russia-Ukraine war, yes, declared its intention of backing Ukraine and chastising that of Russia. But immediately the Russian government issued a warning or a caveat that any country that seeks to support Ukraine will have its own self to be blamed, and was made to be aware that Russia indicated withdrawing the supply of gas to Germany, and this threat alone made Germany to pull the brakes on supporting Russia. So Russia as a country has big influence on the West by virtue of the amount of gas it supplies to the West, because most of the West depend on Russia for gas. So if you should rise up against Russia, they will simply withdraw that supply of gas. And how you are going to get gas to power your plant and your industries will be very difficult. So Russia command a lot of influence in the West.
Yeah, that is why I'm bringing up this issue, because if we look at it recently, Russia was doing their commercial sales of all these commodities in the American dollar. They have suddenly changed it that you have to buy it in their own currency. And now that runs through my mind again about this term that is often heard when we talk about a global economy and speaking about oil and gas and whatever. We hear this term petrodollar, the petrodollar, where you said, and I'm sure a lot of people have heard this petrodollar before. What does it actually mean, and how does it play a role in our global economy?
Petrodollar simply means accepting to be paid by the US dollar when you export oil or petrol. Okay, so Ghana, our currency is Ghana cedis, but when we export our petrol, we have agreed to accept dollar as the currency for payment. We could have agreed to accept cedis because we spend cedis. And a lot of countries also agreed to accepting dollar for the payment of the petroleum product that they export. So petrodollar simply means agreeing to accept dollar as the mode of payment for any petroleum product that you export or that you sell. That is the basic or the fundamental meaning of petrodollar.
But
So,
its role,
come again.
the role that it plays simply makes America a powerful nation. Then,
Yes, because that is the currency. That is the currency most exporting petroleum exporting countries accept, and for that matter, the demand for dollar will certainly go up. And if the demand for something or a commodity goes up, you know how important that commodity becomes. So America being the country that uses dollar and people chasing its currency will certainly put America in a position that will be very, very powerful in the League of Nations.
but now that BRICS is coming up and they are drifting from using the American dollar for their trades, are they not indirectly also breaking down the dominance of America?
Yes, before the um, before the Russia and Ukraine invasion, Russia was also selling its oil in the American dollar, but due to American support to Russia, sorry, Ukraine, Russia has decided to sell its oil or petroleum product and receiving its currency, the ruble. So by virtue of that, the dominance of dollar in the petroleum trade is coming down, and EU, the European Union, is also taking steps to use the euro as the currency that they are going to accept when they export any petroleum product. So by virtue of these two, should tell you that a time will come, the dominance of the dollar in the oil and gas industry will come down drastically. And if it comes down drastically, it will affect Americans' dominance in the global economy. Because of World Trade Center, that is why the American dollar has gained popularity and it is dominating among all other currencies. If you take the pound is bigger, or the pound has more value than the US dollar, but the US dollar is a currency that dominates international trade.
Okay.
This BRIC bloc, with their aim and objectives, will certainly wither down the dominance of the dollar, especially in the petroleum sector.
Okay. Before we come back, because I wanted to look at if there's ever a crumbling effect on this petrodollar, how it will affect the world economy. But before we get to that point, I want to take the views expressed by our followers. Then when we come back, we'll look at it and look at the impact of BRICS on the African nations. Thank you very much. And wherever you are, it's always a joy to be part of your evening. This is my View show coming to you live on today's Ghana News TV. Taking the comments from our followers, Auntie Patricia says, good evening, Comrade Pan, and then your guests. Fair Patricia, we're grateful you're part of the show this evening. Award-winning Patience Darko, good evening, and watching from Hamburg, Germany, educative show. We are very grateful that we are making an impact in your life. Fair Patricia, once again, greetings, senior comrades, keep on with the good work. But we are very grateful that you are always part of the show. Greetings to the people of Hanover. Ajunkwa Media House. Oh, Comrade Ametepe, we are very grateful you are part of the show. Says, good evening, watching you from Frankfurt. We are grateful that you are on the show this evening. Brimpong, I love that. I've missed you for a very long time. But then, UC says, Brimpong says, greetings, comrades, watching from Warsaw, Poland. Brimpong, we are grateful that you are part of the show this evening. Able, yeah, Brimpong, I've taken that. And Omar Dennis, our able vice chairman of the NDC Germany chapter, he says, more grace to your elbows, my able general secretary. Very grateful, honorable vice. Bafi Frimpong, we are grateful once again that you are watching us live on a YouTube channel, and you are watching us on YouTube from St. Petersburg, Russia. My greetings goes to you. We are grateful once again that you are part of the show, Bafi, this evening. Almighty Ose Superior, watching from Warsaw, Poland. We are grateful, Ose. Okay, so far, so good. Now we want to look at if there is ever a crumble on our petrodollar, what will be the fate of America and the global economy? So wherever you are, this is what we are discussing on MyView show on today's Ghana News TV. And my guest this evening is Mr. Charles Mensah, a private legal practitioner and a member of the NDC Hamburg branch. Mr. Mensah, you are welcome back. Just before I went on, I was asking if the petrodollar system ever crumble, what is the fate of America and the global economy? I am asking that if the petrodollar system we just discussed, petrodollar.
Sorry,
You're
I
having
can't
an
hear what you're
issue.
saying. Sorry.
What I'm basically saying is, if the petrodollar system ever crumble, what is the fate of America and the global economy as a whole?
Thank you very much. Certainly, if the petrodollar arrangement crumbles now, the fate of America will be very, very dire because the demand for its currency, that is the US dollar, will not be as much as we have now. And if the demand for the US dollar goes down, the value of the American dollar will also fall, and it will trigger inflation. America will experience inflation hikes. Other economic factors will affect the American economy. And for that reason, I don't think America will take it lightly for the dollar dominance to be whittled down. So it has a very dire implication on the American economy. And going forward, and from where I sit, I don't think America will allow its currency to be weighted down in such a manner. That is why they are always fighting against the establishment of this BRIC bloc. So from the time that the BRIC was formed, it has about only 13 members. The members sign on and they later on exit the group because America knows that if the BRIC should be well formidable, its impact on its economy will be very, very bad. That explains the situation.
Okay, so that means there is going to be a Cold War inverted commas, between America or the West and then the BRICS. Because BRICS essentially is coming out with their own currency that they will use as a medium of trade.
Yeah.
So where we are now, what kind of influence can BRICS have on African nations?
A lot. Let's look at it from this angle. Africa countries are all developing. Most of them, let me put it this way, most of the Africa countries are developing. Most of these Africa countries are uh, um, developing nations, and they need resources to actually develop. So any country that proposes to assist you to develop financially, even if they are not going to take interest on which money they give you or whatever money they give you, and say, okay, I'm giving you a grant, which means you are not going to pay interest, will certainly have influence in that particular African country. So China, you and I know, they are dominating the Ghanaian economy in most of our subsectors, and by virtue of that, whatever we do, we cannot even prosecute Aisha. You remember the senior minister indicated that they are giving us some 2 billion Sino-Hydro loan, and for that matter, prosecuting Aisha will affect that loan. That should tell you that the entrance of China in the Ghanaian economy has a great influence on Ghana. And you remember when Zimbabwe also defaulted in the payment of its financial obligations to China, its airports was overtaken by China. So a lot of these African countries are in one way or the other owing these great countries, and they wouldn't want to lose their asset. And for that matter, they will bow to whatever pressure or whatever proposals these great nations suggest to African countries.
There's a powerful question for you. Emma Davis says, good evening, comrades. Here is Comrade Ehonam watching from Frankfurt. The topic today touches on current and global issues that are very pressing, very enlightening. Great program. Comrade Charles, you mentioned that 70% of resources that power the world is from Africa. If so, why do you suggest that Africa, and for that matter, Ghana's debt to a country, mentioning China in particular, be written off in order for the country to be able to go and borrow more? I think that the last part is truncated, but all the same, the question is,
yes,
if,
let me.
pardon me?
Yes, I made mention of the fact that natural resources,
Yeah.
Africa controls about 70%
70%.
of the natural resources. So you talk of gold, you talk of petrol, you talk of manganese, you talk of bauxite, cocoa. Sorry, cocoa is not part. All the diamond, all the natural resources, Africa as a continent controls about 70%.
Yes, and that is why she's hitting on. Well, if Africa controls 70%, and now here we are asking China to write off our debt to enable us meet conditionalities of IMF so that the country can borrow more. That is where her problem is. Why
Yes,
would
let me explain something to the viewer. You
yeah.
know, in principle, borrowing is not a bad thing. Okay, it only becomes bad when you borrow and you consume, or
Okay.
when you borrow and you don't use for the intended purpose. So if you borrow to build roads, if you borrow to build hospitals, if you borrow to build schools, these are investments that have great dividend on the economy in going forward. But when you borrow to consume, to pay salaries, to pay consumables, goods and services, then it becomes very, very unfortunate because you will find it very, very difficult to reservice your debt. That is why some of us caution the government that borrowing for recurrent expenditure is not the best financial tool that they should consider. But they, as usual, we have the men, so they didn't listen, and now we find ourselves in this mess. Now, China, my proposal for China writing off Ghana's debt so that we will get an IMF program is not necessarily mean we are going to borrow again, because we have been indisciplined with our fiscals, we have been indisciplined in most of our policy choices, and for that matter, when the IMF finally comes on board, some of these indisciplined acts will be taken off, because the IMF will not sit down for you to engage in reckless spending, as we have been seeing. This renting of presidential jets and other stuff, like the number of appointees, the ministries, and blah, blah, blah. These are the very things that is suffocating our resources. So when the IMF is around, the trend shows that we have been disciplined in terms of managing our finances. That is why, as it stands now, I would prefer the IMF should come on board and assist us to come out from the quagmire we find ourselves, because some of us are direct victims of this haircuts that is going on in the country.
I will still come back to the 70% of the resources being controlled or being produced in Africa. I'll still come back to it. But before I get to that point, you just made a statement about the IMF conditionalities. You have made a statement about the appointment of a resident director at the Bank of Ghana. Now we have an appointed resident representative at the Ministry of Finance. This is not the first time Ghana has gone to the IMF. If you take your mind back, just before the last NDC government exited, the last NDC party exited government, we're in IMF. But during that period, we didn't have residents appointments made, or it is something that was done but undercover. What's the difference? What happened?
Okay, thank you very much. I remember on this same platform, I did mention that hitherto IMF was proposing conditionalities for member states that apply for bailouts. Yeah. And along the line, they indicated that, okay, you, the applicants, make your own proposals, things that you think you can do to come out from the economic challenges that you find ourselves. So as it stands now, the country that is seeking an IMF bailout will make the proposal. And you remember that in the case of John Mahama, 2004-2015, when they decided to go to the IMF, they had this
homegrown policies
consultative program, that Senchi Consensus, if you remember, yeah, where they crafted their own homegrown policies and submitted same to the IMF. Because the government of the day at the time consulted all those who ought to be consulted, getting a program became very, very easy for the government, because they sent pragmatic and feasible policies, directions to the IMF. But as usual of this government, we know or we know it also, nobody will be consulted. They went to the IMF without any proper homegrown policies. And when the IMF suggested that they get their own programs and policies for a program to be approved for them. Here we find ourselves with the DDP, that is the Domestic Debt Exchange Program, which we are all grappling with. So, to your question that previously, whether or not resident advisors were appointed or not, no, to the best of my knowledge, this is the first time the IMF and, for that matter, the US are appointing or seeking to appoint resident advisors to the Ministry of Finance and the Bank of Ghana, respectively, because they have actually lost faith in the current managers of the Ghanaian economy. Just that they cannot voice it out and they have to be diplomatic about it. That is why they cannot tell you in the face that they have lost confidence in the management of the economy, the managers of the economy.
Wow. Gifty says, good evening, comrades. And Comrade James Rogers, the vice chairman for Hanover branch, also sends his greetings. Now, let me take you
Okay.
back to the 70% of the resources of the world coming from Africa. It means that from where I sit, Africa can never be independent because BRICS forming itself has an agenda in Africa, our resources. They want to have a control over it. The West doing everything possible is to ensure that Africa continue to remain wherever we are so that they will continue to thrive on our resources. Can Africa then ever be independent or be free on its own?
Thank you very much. Africa can be very, very independent. As it stands now, Africa is independent on paper, but in practicality, it is not independent. We can only achieve independence in a true and proper meaning if our leaders apply common sense. Because common sense over the years has been lacking in the way we do our things as a nation. By extension, Africa. Look, there are certain things that we need not to engage in as a country. Let me take you to Ghana. You know that I'm a Ghanaian and I'll certainly use Ghana as an example in whatever I see. Let's take free education. That is free SHS, for instance. Government pays for everybody. Okay, and these students are made up of day students and boarders. So you buy food for a boarder 3 times a day, and you buy food for a day student once a day. So are you even, as a government, being equitable? You are not. You ought to allow the parents to pay for the boarding fee if they prefer their children to be in the boarding school, so that the boarding fee resources could be used to develop other part of the economy. They are only doing this because of politics, that everybody should be allowed to go to school for free, whether in the boarding school or in the day school system. Secondly, there are certain parents who are rich enough and can pay the school fees of their wards. And for that matter, they should have piloted this program, one, or they should have segregated it in such a way that those who actually need the financial support will be given the financial support, and those who have the means to pay will be made to pay. The fact that you pay school fees doesn't mean you are not being catered for. Because if you can pay 2,000 for your ward in JHS, what shows that you cannot pay, let's say, 1,500 for the same 2,000 for your ward in the SHS. So that when the economy grows and there is much in our kitty, we could do this wholesale free SHS policy. So Africa can be an independent country if our leaders apply common sense in some of our policy choices and directions. No, when we are going for election year, then we waste money here and there. We waste money here and there. After the elections, we come back to square zero.
Ima Davis is back. He says, thank you, Comrade Jerome, for the question on IMF monitoring residents. My question is that, has this condition come to stay for even when our party comes to power as well? To me, it's an insult to our dignity and reputation. Of course, our leaders are to blame. Yet, as a whole, we must admit it's demeaning, and I don't think it's something we should entertain. It's just like going to the Ghana embassy in Germany and having Turkish security guards controlling us in German language. Yeah, so essentially where this is coming from, NDC went to IMF, and when NDC left, MPP continued, enjoyed it, and organized a Kenke party when they left IMF. Now we have IMF conditionalities, which is giving us resident advisors at the Bank of Ghana, Ministry of Finance. Who knows? Many more could either come up before the final deal is sealed.
Yes.
Are these people going to stay?
But let me also add that Ghana is a member of the IMF, so going to the IMF is not a bad thing. Save that the current leadership bastardized the previous administration for going to IMF. That is why it seems going to IMF is a bad thing. We are a member state of the IMF, and where the need be, we should resort to the IMF. Just that when you go to the IMF, they will not allow you to misuse the resources that is at your disposal.
Then in that sense, because this is not the first time Ghana is going to the IMF. Ghana has been to the IMF several times. Yes. Does that mean that we cannot be on our own? Are there any lessons learned? And should those lessons not lead us to be able to win off those same practices that often end us in IMF?
That is why I said common sense. We have been in discipline. We have been in discipline as a nation. That is why we normally go back to the IMF. Because when the IMF comes on board, you realize that we exhibit some sort of discipline. Because they will not sit down for you to engage in reckless expenditures and other sort of things that will put your economy out of gear.
Okay, let me push you down the political line a bit. What will NDC probably do differently from what we are experiencing now? We have a government with the highest number of ministerial appointments, and we have a government with the highest number of presidential staffers and all that. What probably would the NDC do differently? Or what would NDC tell the Ghanaian voter that you would do differently if the opportunity is given to you?
Yes, the only thing I can say that the NDC will do differently if they should come to power in 2025 is that they are going to be disciplined in terms of managing the economy. We are going to be truthful to the Ghanaian people. Where it is good, we'll tell you it is good. Where it is bad, we'll tell you it is bad. So if you recall, the then President Mahama made mention of we haven't chewed all the meat and it is now left with the bone. It was a clear and honest admission that where the economy had gotten to was there and we needed everybody on board. But that is not the case that we find today. Whatever the situation is, we try as much as possible to blame it on COVID. We try as much as possible to blame it on Russia, Ukraine, exculpating themselves from liabilities of whatever we are facing today. Because if you want to solve a problem, you need to first identify that there is a problem. Yes, you need to identify that there is a problem. But if you are failing to identify that there is a problem, you can also not solve it. So for where I sit, I will say when NDC comes to power in 2025, we are going to be disciplined with our fiscals, and we are not going to engage in these reckless expenditures that we are seeing today. We are also not going to engage in unnecessary appointments, whereby all these appointees draw salary from the same public person.
Wow, that's interesting. I'm sure a lot of people there, especially the floating voters who are up there, will be very delighted if these are actually implemented, because that is essentially what the Ghanaian is looking for. The Ghanaian is looking for a government or a party that will come into government and they can go to sleep at peace, wake up and be able to afford a 3 square meal. Today we are told they are doing 010, what have you. But it is one thing being promised and said, and it's being one thing is being implemented. So we just pray and hope that the NDC will come to power 2025, and then the Ghanaian will definitely enjoy the rescue mission that you are promising, and we believe strongly that it will be delivered. Now, let me just remind our followers, wherever they are, that we have our newspaper that hits the newsstand every Thursday morning, the Evening Tribune, and we report it raw as it is. And if you have any publication, we can equally get in touch with us, and we will put it up on the newsstand for you. It is the Evening Tribune, and it comes out every Thursday morning on the newsstand. So yeah, by Wednesday evening, it is set. Do not miss it. Get it and get well informed about current activities, and we report it just as it is without any blink. Very good evening to Leila Mahama, and she is watching us from Billyfield. We are grateful, Leila, that almost every day you are part and parcel of our show. And it has been a wonderful show this evening. We're discussing the influence of BRICS on the African nations, or the West losing its hegemony. And whatever it is, we have taken your views. We have taken the views of our guest this evening in the person of Mr. Charles Mensah, who is a private legal practitioner and a member of the NDC branch in Germany. Mr. Mensah, now we will take your parting words. What are we going to tell our people up there? Today, Ghana is in a ditch. Nothing seems to be working. The fight for our educational system is almost crushed. We have lost eventually the entire forest cover of the country. Our water bodies are totally gone. Galamsey has taken a better part of our livelihood, that people are willing to put themselves at the mercy of the weather to be able to survive. The Ghanaian currently has almost lost hope in himself or herself, and is looking up to what different thing can come their way. Where you sit, what do you think the NDC can tell the Ghanaian as at now?
Yes, all that I will say to the Ghanaian people is that they shouldn't throw their hands in despair. All is not lost. When the NDC comes to power, they will fix the economy for the betterment of each and every one, because the track record is there, and everybody can attest to the fact that JM did far better than the current administration in terms of education, in terms of health, in terms of transport, in terms of infrastructure. So they shouldn't throw their hands in despair. Everything will be okay when JM comes into power in 2025.
Wonderful. Before I let you go, there is a Emma Davis is back to this. She has a little bit of disagreement. She says, Comrade Charles, I disagree with you if you say it's not a bad thing to go to IMF. IMF gives double-digit loans to its third world member nations. Have you ever heard that for the first time for any first world member country? No. Why? Because the deal is always made to keep third world nations indebted. Professor Atta Mills was able to halt inflation, stabilize, run, and grow the economy without going to IMF. Borrowing is not a good thing. We have more than many nations. We have more than many nations have, yet we continue to borrow to satisfy our own greed. This is what she is saying.
Okay, so I can let me tell Emma that I will agree to disagree with her on this because the issues that she has Emma, she's a female, right?
Yes, please.
Okay, the issues that she has raised, I also disagree with her completely because you know, borrowing, as I keep on saying, is not a bad thing. Even if you study finance, Modigliani principle tells you that the value of a company is determined by virtue of the debt the company has in its capital structure. Do you know the reason why? Because you pay interest before you pay tax. A company that has debt in its capital structure pays interest before it pays tax. But a company or an entity that do not have debt in its capital structure doesn't pay interest. It pays tax that straightforward. So the tax component becomes bigger than a company that has debt in its capital structure. So I disagree with her on this. So I'm agreeing to disagree with her on this issue. And the second aspect of Ghana going to the IMF, if we think going to the IMF is a bad thing, then I will then suggest that we withdraw our membership from the IMF. You know, the IMF is an inter-governmental organization,
Yeah.
okay, that seeks to bail out member states when they find themselves in difficulties. So if we are saying that today we find ourselves in difficulties, and for that matter, we are going to the IMF, it means after completing our program with the IMF, we should stay disciplined. We should stay disciplined so that going back to the IMF will be impossible. But anytime we exit the yes, Ghana is not a company. Yes, it's a country. But in terms of looking at entities, you can say it is a company because whatever the companies or whatever a company does, Ghana also do the same thing. A company has a budget, we also have a budget, and every budget has two lines, that is expenditure and how do you call revenue mobilization. But as I indicated earlier, we agree to disagree tonight, so that is it.
Wonderful.
I was on the issue of going to the IMF. Yes,
Yeah.
she also made mention of the fact that some countries are giving three what?
No, the developing countries are giving double-digit interest loans. For
Yes,
instance, you
you
will not
know,
get anything like a 9% interest. No, it's always above.
yes, when you give out a loan, you look at certain things before you price your interest. Okay, you look at the person's, you look at the risk factor, you also look at the person's ability to repay. So you wouldn't, as a businessman, grant a loan to somebody whose credit worthiness is very, very low. All right. So IMF will not give you so much money when they know that you are already suffocated by high public debt. They wouldn't do that. But they will certainly give another country high loan or an amount that is very, very huge if the country exhibits the characteristics of being able to repay the loan. Because this 3 billion is not free money, it is a loan, and we are going to repay it.
Yeah.
So
But
our
that is quite
our
interesting.
our worthiness, our credit worthiness shows how much the IMF can grant or not grant. Because we made a proposal of 3 billion. It could be possible that this 3 billion will come down. It could also be possible that they will give us the same amount. John Mahama's era, we were giving about 900 something million, not even 1 billion.
Well, I see, the era of John Mahama is quite different because this current government, they just need this money to be to come and have a debt sustainability to enable them borrow more money,
Yes,
you know,
yes.
which is quite
You know,
unfortunate.
you
But there
know,
is,
you know, when we are able to secure a program with the IMF, it is not a matter of we will be able to borrow. It is just a matter of the international capital market will be accessible to us.
to us,
But when you go, okay, when you go, whether you have the needed amount to borrow is also another
is
issue.
another factor.
Because the market will be open to you, but nobody will offer to buy your bonds. So it's a different ball game altogether.
Wow, wow. Unfortunately, our time is fast spent already. You know, it is why taking
Yes,
off is also.
I will prefer to have the tester's contact so that I engage her and explain things to her to clear her.
Oh, okay. You mean Ima Davis?
Yeah, I think so. I think
Okay,
so.
okay. I'll
Yes,
I'll contact my producer and then we'll take it from there. We'll take it from there.
yes. Thank you
In
very
fact,
much.
I think producer will have to give us more time the next time because a topic like this for 1 hour is simply too short for us to
Not
get to the
yes,
details. You know, at least we would have looked at the differences between MPP and NDC vis-a-vis going to IMF and coming back and being able to implement. And even because right now the MPP said NDC went to IMF and therefore they were incompetent. Here we are today. They are even failing to meet the conditionalities to be able to get to assess something from the
yes.
IMF. So, in such a case, do you now say they are super incompetent or what? How do we turn them? But unfortunately, our time is
Yes,
fast spent.
they created this whole impression that going to the IMF suggests that you are incompetent. That is not the case. You are simply you are simply telling the IMF that you are in crisis, and for that matter, they should just come and bail you out. Economists, world economists, have all in one way or the other suffered some crisis. So if the Ghanaian economy was in 2015, 2014, 2015 in crisis and sought IMF bailout, doesn't mean the manager at the time was incompetent. Certain factors that affect the economy, no one can control it. And for that matter, when they hit you before you know that you need to do A or B. So every resilient economy is determined by the kind of buffers the economy has. So you remember John Mahama started building what we call the sinking fund. We also built the stabilization fund and other funds. If my memory serves me right, those the GIIF, that is the Ghana Infrastructure Investment Fund. These are all funds that the Mahama administration got to withstand some shocks that may before the country. So, for instance, the Ghana Investment Infrastructure Fund was formed with the aim of accruing some funds for our infrastructure needs, and a seed money of $250 million was earmarked for that fund. So that should tell you that the manager at the time wasn't incompetent, but it was just a matter of certain misfortune that hit the economy. So if by their own estimation for saying that going to the IMF suggests that you are incompetent, then they not even being able to secure an IMF program suggests that they are super incompetent bunch of reckless government appointees who always brag as having the men not knowing they are radar station boys, as His Excellency the former president suggested on his campaign trail. So going to the IMF, if by virtue of the NPP's own estimation is a mark of incompetence, then they are super incompetent. I agree with that assertion.
Wonderful. But a lot of people are a bit puzzled because when the NDC was in government, our current Vice President, Dr. Mahmoud Bawumia, was delivering lectures from one university to the other, providing all the solutions to the economic challenges that the country was facing. Now he is the Vice President. He's the head of the economic management team, but the country has gone into the ditch. Is it not? Is it therefore true to say that one thing is when you are out of government or when you are not in government, you criticize. So speaking is very easy, but when it comes to implementation, it's quite different. Remember, he asked
Yes,
100 and something questions for the former vice president, who is now late. May his soul rest in peace. And today he cannot answer those same questions. I thought the solution to those questions would have been the solution to the economic situation that the country has found itself.
yes. Let me borrow his own words that he uttered some time back, that when you make propaganda with the economy, the exchange rate will expose you. Yes, when you make propaganda with the economy, COVID-19 and Russia-Ukraine will expose you, because if you don't make propaganda with the economy, you will build buffers. And when COVID-19 and Russia-Ukraine comes in, you will be able to withstand the shocks. So, by virtue of their own failure to build the necessary buffers, 19 really showed that the country was built on a foundation that wasn't solid. That is why we find ourselves where we are.
Wonderful.
The
Unfortunately, our
IMF,
time is
I think today or yesterday, the IMF has indicated that our international reserves
reserved.
is completely or almost empty. You understand? And
International
international
reserves.
reserves are built purposely for absorbing shocks that the economy may face. So if your international reserves are gone, then you should realize that you are in a difficult situation.
Well, think this is where we'll draw the curtains down on this evening's program. And we're very grateful, Mr. Charles Mensah, for your time and then your views on the influence of BRICS on the African nations and then the way forward. I mean, I'm pretty sure we'll come again your way with another sensitive topic on this issue so that we'll explain more and go down well, because BRICS is running across the African nations, a lot of news all over, but we need to really understand the point from which they are also going to operate. Will it be a better way for the African nations to lean towards BRICS, or it will be better for them to continue to rely on the West? And the West definitely is going down in bits and pieces as a result of the growth of BRICS day in and day out. So we're very grateful for your time, and we wish you all the best for the week. And God willing, we will come again another day. So, and to our viewers out there, we are very grateful that you have all joined us for MyView show on today's Ghana News TV. Wherever you are, if you even missed the program, you've missed the show, the link is right up there. Go over it, go through it, send your comments, and together we will continue to work hard for the growth of Mother Ghana. It's been Jerome Kpan, your host on MyView show on today's Ghana News TV. Have a good evening, and God bless us all.
Ya kana se wantia ejao ehenya beto mampam osontie so dogo binwa bem mampam osontie nani amuka nyina kuna swati move swara mampam osontie move swara Mampam, also until